Welcome to the Dynasty Playbook, your source for all Dynasty fantasy football knowledge and mostly shenanigans. I'm your host, Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF Marine and on Twitter at DrewDotsonNFL. With me are my co-hosts, Scott and Tyler. We got everybody together today. You can find Tyler on Reddit at Barrels and on Twitter at HBombIDP. You can find Scott on Reddit at Stewie35. And we're finally making him get a Twitter. He needs to be accessible to the public so you can all shame him. But guys, it's been forever and a day since we've all been on the show at the same time. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty excited because it's definitely more fun when we're all here to shoot the shit and I guess talk some Dynasty. So how you guys doing today?
Doing good. It's a little bit too early. I like it when we do late. Then it's like extra late for you guys and like fine for me. This way sucks.
Yeah, because when we go on at like midnight for Drew and I, it's about noon in California. And I'm positive that time difference is more than 2 hours.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it. Scott's like, yeah, we can just go on at like 10 o'clock my time. That'd be cool. You guys are like 11 o'clock my time. I'm like, dog, that's like 1 o'clock in the morning for us. And I can't do that anymore. But that's all well and good. But let's anything interesting happen this week? I mean, besides 4th of July, it's 1 year in a row now that my dog has not run away on 4th of July. So I don't have to spend July 5th and 6th trying to find my dog out in the neighborhood. So already a better July 5th than it was last year. I get to talk Dynasty instead of looking for lost dogs, which is not fun.
Yeah, no fun at all. And I remember we were actually drafting the Reddit sub league last year, and Drew lost his dog, and that was my heart was breaking, man, because I know what that's like. That sucks. But it's 1 year since we drafted that league. That was fun, right? Can't believe it's been a year.
Yep. But luckily the dumb dog came home. He's not very smart, but he made his way home, so I guess he's kind of smart. But we can review. We actually have news to talk about. It's super exciting. I mean, especially exciting for me, considering I'm at least 80% to 90% Ladarius Green share ownership, and Antonio Gates has been suspended for the first 4 games of the 2015 season. So, I mean, for all of you guys that were really relying on Antonio Gates for your fantasy matchups this year, that's what you get, because he's old, and I blame you. And for all you guys holding Ladarius Green, celebrate. Do the dance. I'm so excited. But I'm not going to sit here and gush about Green for 5 to 10 minutes, so I'll let Scott and Tyler tell us what they think.
Well, I mean, it's great for the Green owners. That's the first thing when I read it. I don't know if you got my message or not. I said, Drew, I'm so happy for you and Ladarius today. Finally, you will be united in a starting lineup. And then my immediate thought was, can Kristen Michael play tight end for the Chargers? And then you could just have a roster-gasm if you get both of those guys in the lineup at the same time. But it's Ladarius's. I mean, we're going to find out now. I mean, he's got 4 games to show if he's got it or not. And he's finally going to get the opportunity. So, yeah, pretty cool. And Old Man Gates is probably the end of his fantasy relevance is nigh. If it wasn't before, it really is now.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good time for Green to show what he's really got. I think his value can go up a lot right after this, or obviously, I mean, during this situation, it's going to be going up. But I'd still expect Gates to get a lot of work after the 4-game suspension. So Green owners are going to be stoked. This will be a good sight into the future. But I think he's still who he was before. You just finally get to see him play on the field now.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I'm obviously going to have lots of opportunities to sell Green if I wanted to, but I'm not rushing to sell him just because of this news. if I'm not getting top 5 or 6 tight end value out of selling him, I'm not selling him because I think he's got that upside easily. I think if he's got a whole season to start, he could outshine Travis Kelce as the top 3 tight end. That's how high I am on his talent. Maybe I'm just high in general, but YOLO. And speaking of Christine Michael, I saw an upsetting news blurb this morning that he's going to be fighting it out with Thomas Rawls for the final running back roster spot in Seattle, which I don't know how to handle that. On the one side, it means he might get to go to a team that might actually use him. On the other side, how good is Thomas Rawls really that he's going to lose his roster spot to him? I'm sad.
It just sounds like off-season crap to me. I'm going to run that right through my off-season filter of if I don't hear it 5 times, I never heard it at all. So, whatever.
Yeah, I guess when it affects players that are highly volatile already, I'm just way too tuned in, and I'm gonna overreact to everything.
I mean, there are much better situations he could fall into than Seattle, though. If it were to come to that, I mean, it's not like he's going to go the season as a free agent. He'll be picked up immediately.
Right. You know, like he could go to Atlanta and be a 3-down back.
Yeah. I mean, if that were to happen, which I really, really, really doubt that it'll happen, there's a definite silver lining to be had.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely Dallas.
Twitter will explode.
I'll explode.
The internet would just melt if Dynasty internet would melt if Christine Michael went to Dallas.
It'd be fantastic. Third round startup pick if he goes to Dallas before he ever takes a snap.
No doubt.
He'd be right back where he was last year.
Right. Fantastic. And I know there are some people out there that don't believe in Christine Michael, Pat, that think we're just hired and batshit right now, talking about his value increasing that much, especially after he gets dropped. But you can't just wash away love. It stays there forever. But I guess we'll talk about our next guy. We got Sheldon Richardson, who is a D lineman for the Jets. He was a Pro Bowler last year. He was already kind of in a muddy situation this year with them bringing in Leonard. He spent top 7 pick on him, and now Leonard Williams is going to get a chance to take a significant amount of snaps. He's going to get 4 games worth of production. And I mean, I like Leonard Williams. I don't know what his legitimate upside is as an IDP play, but I can't imagine it's going to be that low. I could see high-end DN2 numbers off him from him right off the bat. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. He's got a lot of upside. This is probably one of the better players in the draft overall. Not as important on a roster as some of the other guys that got drafted above him, but uber talented guy. So I definitely think he's got some upside. Surprised to see him get the starting job so easily, but hey, when it's given to you, hopefully he takes advantage of it, and we see a lot more from him.
I mean, to me, I'm not surprised at all that he's seeing the starting lineup so early. I mean, this guy, in my opinion, he was probably the most talented player in the entire draft, over Jameis Winston, over Mariota, over Cooper. It's just because of the positional values and team need that he fell to 7. Because he could have been a legitimate pick at number 2 overall, and nobody would have questioned it. So I mean, I don't know. Apparently, some teams had concerns about him, and New York didn't. So they get to reap the rewards of it.
Yeah, I figured they would work him in there, but I was just surprised to see. I mean, Richardson's out, so obviously they're going to go ahead and start the young kid. They're paying him the money already. So why not? But I figured it was going to take some time, rotate him in, get him in some situational things first. Good for him, though.
Yeah, I mean they believed him so much they've been shopping Muhammad Wilkerson, and I mean that guy's a stud just in his own right. So if they're willing to shop him in order to get Leonard Williams as a full-time starter, that's pretty telling to me.
Yeah, Leonard Williams to me, he's pro ready. He was pro ready last year. He would have been an NFL caliber defensive end or five technique, whatever the hell he is, last year. So the dude is legit. Sheldon getting suspended, and it's a weird situation there, and with the Jets and everybody in IDP land, especially those of us that are doing startups right now after Williams has been drafted. We're not real sure how to handle Richardson, Williams, Wilkerson. Do we bump them down because we're worried about a rotation? What do we do? So the fact that Richardson's out, Williams is going to get a ton of run early. We're going to see what's up. We're going to see if he's the real deal or not. I'm still not sold on him as an IDP play outside of just extremely tackle heavy leagues. But we're going to find out. So definitely interested to see. And I'm kind of interested to see what they do with Richardson when he comes back. What kind of rotation are they going to run? Because that's definitely going to be pretty telling as to what it does for their individual IDP values.
Yeah, and I guess Scott wants us to talk about Rolando McClain because he got suspended too. I didn't even write him in the script because I really didn't care. As an IDP play, I mean he's all right, but it doesn't really matter for me. His backups were barely worth rostering anyways. I think Spencer's probably the only one that gets any sort of bump from this, and it's minuscule at that. I mean, Tyler, feel free to disagree with me, but I think the guys who are going to have value still have value, and the guys who didn't are still just garbage.
Yeah, I mean, it's Sean Lee's the only linebacker that I'm really even interested in. Who knows? Rankin McClain I ranked him really, really low just because the risk associated with him. I mean, he's still young, and the dude is legit talented. I mean, he is a hell of a linebacker, but it's almost Josh Gordon-esque in owning a guy like that. Obviously, the price isn't going to be as high. It's not near as a high profile of a name, but the situation is eerily similar in that you don't know what you're going to get, like Darrell Washington. I got Darrell Washington on several rosters, and he's just chewing up space, just chewing it up. But when he comes back, he's going to feed. McClain's not anywhere near that level of an IDP play, but he's probably penciled into a ton of starting lineups already on Dynasty rosters, and now you're just going to have to do the Rolando McClain thing where you wait it out again.
Yeah, you guys hit it all
more?
on the head. No, I got nothing. I got nothing to add to that. You guys hit it.
All right, well, I guess let's move into our college player discussion. And this week we got Devontae Booker, running back from Utah. Now, I'm really glad we picked this guy because we don't all agree on what he is. I actually like Booker. He had excellent balance, excellent burst to the line. His top speed is meh. He's probably going to be 4.5-ish at best. His blocking is worse than his speed. This guy, he's on par with the worst pass blockers in this class. And, I mean, those were pretty damn bad. I mean, we talked about how bad Josh Robinson was, 2 weeks ago? He's that bad, easily. He doesn't have any idea what he's doing, so he's got a year to try and figure it out, but I don't think he's gonna. There's so little foundation to even build upon there. But in terms of a pure running back, I really, really like Booker. I think he's got potential to be a 3-down back. I mean, if he hits, I'm not seeing like top 5 running back numbers, but he could easily be high-end RB2, low-end RB1. He can catch the ball, which it's kind of hard to tell from the limited tape because his quarterback sucks. But when there was a catchable ball, he was able to catch it. And then the quarterback threw a lot of balls that I wouldn't define as catchable or thrown well. But I actually like the guy, so I'll let these two curmudgeons give us their dissenting opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he was just okay for me. I thought he ran really smart, really patient. You know, he'd wait for the hole to open, and he'd hit it and get through the hole pretty quickly. And there were a few times where he anticipated the hole really well. Like the hole wasn't there, and he just takes a little half step, and then boom, he's in it. He kind of, the two comps that I kind of came up with while I was watching him. He reminds me of a very very poor man's Arian Foster combined with a very poor man's Tevin Coleman. He has a similar game to Arian Foster with the jump cut, but he's mostly moving lateral with that. And then he has a similar game to Tevin Coleman, where if he gets through the crease, he can get to the second level, but he is not pulling away from anybody, so he's not going to hit any home runs. It's difficult evaluating a running back in that kind of offense where it's mostly going to be leads, or not leads, but just running out of the shotgun. Nobody in front of him, not a whole lot of pulling going on. But for me, he's just completely meh. If I had just a very early preliminary ranking of next year's running backs, he's already outside of my top 10 of the guys.
Yeah, you make the Arian Foster comp, and I really like that because that was the first one that showed up to me too. And not only does he have a similar cut to him, he runs smart. You can see the intelligence in his planning and his running, kind of like you see with Foster. Foster is very calculating as a runner, and you can see Booker. He has great open field vision. He's able to kind of see where the defenders are and plan around them. Granted, he doesn't have as good a view of where his own team is and planning around them. He likes to run into them sometimes, but I like him. I mean, I've already talked about how I like him, so I'm going to let Scott tell us how much he likes him or doesn't like him. Or hates him.
I think he's a decent back. Definitely good on the ground. I liked when they would hand the ball off laterally almost to the line. He'd be running parallel to the line rather than at it. He seemed to read that really well with the zone blocking scheme. He can make one guy miss, or he can just break a couple tackles, especially guys that are going too high or trying to arm tackle him. So that was good to see. Definitely had a couple big runs because of that. The blocking, like you guys said, was terrible. The blocking was atrocious. I mean, I saw him. I think Cut had a penalty for a cut block once. A couple times I saw him just stand there or block a guy that was actually already being blocked and let a blitzer go past him. It was, I mean, the blocking wasn't very good. The catching from what I saw was decent. He only caught like 3 passes, and they're all really short routes, so I don't know if he can actually be a wide receiver. But he seems to have, I mean, the general idea of playing running back down. I would definitely compare him to Arian Foster. I actually looked up their differences. I think they're like 2 inches different in height and about 15 pounds different in weight. That was the first person I saw. As soon as watching him there, the ground game, he's got good short distance. Good at getting through a hole. Good at finding the hole in that zone blocking scheme, like I was talking before. But I don't see him breaking out any big runs or anything like that. Top end speed's not there. So I mean, not really knowing how my board looks at all, I'm probably drafting him early 3rd round next year.
Yeah, this guy's probably a second rounder for me. And I do want to point out that, remember, Arian Foster was undrafted based on people's evaluations of him. So just keep that in mind. This guy's probably going to be all pro. It's pretty good. I'm not forming any man crushes yet or anything, but one thing that you did say, and then I already lost my thought train on it. Probably gone. Probably gonna upset me. I got nothing. French fried potatoes. Yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to our IDP spotlight because I can't remember what I wanted to say, and now I'm mad. And I'm gonna go back as when I'm editing this, and I'm gonna hear it, and I'm gonna remember what I wanted to say. I might actually edit it in there. But let's move on to our IDP spotlight, and we got good old Carlos, Carlos Dunlap. Guy's 26 years old, and I mean he's not breaking into anybody's top 5 defensive ends, but that's all right. I mean he's kind of your steady Eddie. He's especially with as volatile as the defensive end position is. It's nice to have a guy who's going to produce for you consistently, even if you're not going to get, J.J. Watt, Robert Quinn numbers from him. And he's not going to cost you near what J.J. Watt or Robert Quinn cost you. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think he's still going to be the same guy he was before. You're just going to be able to rely on him for the same type of production you have in the past. And that's really all I got to say about him.
Yeah, I think Dunlap is one of those guys I end up actually staying away from. Normally, I agree he's someone that's pretty consistent. Doesn't get you big numbers, but he'll consistently get you somewhere around the same amount of numbers. Personally, I like to take flyers at defensive end and any defensive line position, really. I like to go take a risk on a guy that's still coming up and will randomly get me 0 points, but will also randomly get me 8 or 9 or 10 points. And I just don't think, at least in most of the scoring leagues that I'm in, Carlos Dunlap doesn't usually get up to 10 points. It's 5, 6, somewhere around there, which is good if you just have that every week. I'm not saying that's a bad thing or that he's a bad player, but I think I prefer someone that's going to be more volatile, like Drew was talking about, and just going to score me those random 15, 10 to 12 point games.
Yeah, see, Dunlap, for me, he's my kind of IDP player. Just Mr. Consistent, Mr. Reliable. You know what you're going to get pretty much every year.
And it's also because you hate upside, right?
Not that I hate upside. We've gone over this. I value consistency. And Carlos Dunlap is
twist
Mr.
your words
Consistent.
however you want.
I can't have J.J. Watt. I won't pay J.J. Watt price. So Carlos Dunlap fits my profile pretty well.
Ziggy Ansah's the same price. He's got way better upside.
Agree to disagree. I have Ziggy ranked higher. I do. But Dunlap, I think, is my number 10 overall defensive lineman, and that's perfect. A low-end DL1 who's going to do, he is what he is. He was Mr. Safe, Mr. Steady, Mr. Reliable, and he is capable of putting up some big weeks. Now, especially if they got a little bit of help on the other side, and we're not relying on the Margus Hunt, Wallace Gilberry tandem, whatever the hell that thing was last year. We got Michael Johnson back in Cincinnati. Gino's going to be hopefully healthier. I don't know if his arrow is necessarily pointing up that much, but the outlook looks a little bit better than it did last year, and he was still a very solid IDP play last year.
Absolutely. I mean, at worst, his arrow is pointing sideways. It's definitely not pointing down. And, Scott, I don't know what kind of scoring leagues you're in where you're getting, 5 and 6 point weeks from, a low-end DN1, high-end DN2, but that's pretty low scoring. Because Dunlap should be getting you 10-point games, but isn't really breaking you into, the 18, 20, 25-point range. And, Tyler, feel free to correct me, but, that seems low, doesn't it?
He's going to have his. I'm looking at his scoring in the league that I have him. It's fairly balanced. 9, 7, 16, 9, 11, 15. He's got a 5-pointer in there. He's got a 20. He just doesn't have a lead upside, but his floor is relatively high. I'd compare him to a Alfred Morris of the defensive line, something like that. Even though it's gross. We don't like Alf, but you know what Alf's going to get you every week. He's going to get you RB3 numbers every week. Every week. That
was a gross comparison. It makes me sad because I actually like Dunlap. He's probably my 12 or 13, so you and I aren't even that far apart. But, he's actually pretty good, so I don't like that comparison. But I get what you're trying to say. But I guess let's move on to our submitted questions for the week, and we got a bunch of them, so I'm pretty excited because we got 2 weeks worth of questions built up because we used up our extra time slot to do the IDP show last week, and then we didn't weren't able to find any extra time to do the actual show last week. But our first question comes from Cards Fan 1343, and he said he'd love to hear a theory discussion on team makeup as a hypothetical team progresses from complete rebuild to contender in 3 to 4 years. Leave specific players out of it. Just talk about the type of players your team should consist of at each step in the process. And kind of an example he gives is, year one, load up on future picks, sell off any running back with any value, and any wide receiver over 25. Don't invest in one or two highly coveted young guys, but rather load up on multiple of young running backs who are maybe second-round rookie picks and fit the bill of lottery picks. And Scott, I'll let you open for us.
All right. So when I'm a contender, or when I'm going from being a contender to a rebuild, first thing I do, obviously, I agree, sell off any old people. I mean, even if I have an older quarterback, like if I owned a Peyton Manning or Drew Brees or Tom Brady, sell that guy off too. Sell out running backs, wide receivers, basically sell everybody. Anybody that's getting old, just sell them. Sell everyone. Get future picks. I like to try and get first rounders. I'll usually bundle a couple guys rather than taking a second for multiple guys. And first thing I draft is obviously young wide receivers. That's first and foremost. And I usually like to, in that first year, I also usually like to grab a tight end that everyone thinks is going to be pretty good. If I can get him in like a late second, early third round, I'm really excited about getting a tight end there because I know it's going to take them 3 to 4 years to develop. So I like to try and find a tight end in that first year of rebuilding too, but I'm not investing a lot. And then, after that, every year I'm drafting wide receivers. I'm looking for the top end guys, but also any other guy that has high upside. The floor don't really matter. It doesn't really matter to me, and I'm okay with the guy that's going to not start for a year or get very limited touches because chances are I'm probably trying to bomb a little bit that season anyways and not do the best my team can possibly do, or not try and get 5 wins or 8 wins that next season. Like I'm trying to get 2 wins or 1 win. And once again, set myself up in a good position. And build wide receivers next, and then about a year or two out from thinking you're going to contend when you have your wide receivers pretty well set, then you go for the running backs. And all the time, it's not hard to find a quarterback. So whenever you get a chance to get a pretty talented quarterback, I usually just pick that up.
Yeah, the question kind of answered itself for me. This is eerily similar to what I'm doing in the Dynasty subreddit league, where I had a team last year that was pretty good. I think I finished 4th in the league, but looking at my team, it was all over the map. It wasn't ever going to happen, so I just blew it up. I sold Brandon Marshall, sold Bobby Wagner, sold JPP, acquired an ass load of picks, and I already have a bunch of picks for next year. And I traded down I actually traded Drew. I traded down a couple spots in the first round so I could pick up a couple more lottery tickets. So for me, I want to throw as many darts as I possibly can. I know you said leave specific players out of it, but like what I did in this one, I traded out where I would have taken Yeldon. Drew takes Yeldon. I move up. I get Jalen Strong, Devin Funchess, Chris Conley, Darren Waller. Just names and just throwing as many as I can out there, trying to hit on 50% of them. So in a total rebuild, I'm not even necessarily paying that much attention to what position they play. Just going to scoop up the youngest, highest upside, most talented players I can, like I would approach any other draft. I just want more of it. I'm not satisfied with just 1 second-round pick. Give me 3 second-round picks or something like that. And I'm not afraid to undersell either in situations like that. My team's not going anywhere. If a guy's not going to offer me any real utility and could actually impede my rebuild by winning me more games than what my team is capable of, he's got to go. And if he's got to go for less than market value, so be it.
Yeah. I think for me, the quickest thing I do when it's rebuild time is I look at my team for the next 2 years. I look at every player and I think, what of these players doesn't have a good chance of at least maintaining their value over the next 2 years? I don't care what their age is. I don't care what their production is. If they're going to lose value or even have, a relatively high expected chance of losing value, they're gone. That's my first thing, and stocking up on draft picks above all else, because first of all, they're universal currency. Everybody wants draft picks. Second of all, they don't get older. So even if I invested in, Sammy Watkins or something, if I invested in him this year, he's going to be 24 by the time I'm looking at maybe even potentially being a contender. Whereas with a draft pick 2 years down the road, I could be having a 21-year-old. Granted, I still want Sammy Watkins in a rebuild. I'm not saying Sammy Watkins is already going to be too old. Don't get my words twisted. But for me, I want as many draft picks as I can, and I'm going to look at every prospect. I don't care what their position is. I'm going to see who I think has the best chance of increasing in value in those first 2 years. Whether it's, if I get a 25% increase in value and I can flip them, that increases the value of my team. I don't care if I think they're going to get fantasy points or not, because I can trade every single player that I've picked up and bring in fantasy producers if I have to. Because young players with higher value are always going to be worth something on the trade market. There will be half your league that's willing to trade for them. So that's how I'm approaching it. I don't care about position, wide receiver, running back, what have you. Like, look at Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley could easily be a first-round starter pick next year if he looks good at all. He could easily jump Lacey as the number 2 running back. And there's a fair amount of people out there who believe he could jump Bell as the number 1 running back if he looks good enough. Which, I mean, if you watch Gurley, it's not out of the question. So Gurley would not just be off my board just because he's a running back. So I'm with Tyler on that one. Position's not as important. But it's a very I know we weren't supposed to mention specific players, but I do what I want. But for me, it's value. Value is the best way you're going to rebuild quicker. Value, active on the trade market. Make sure you're flipping assets. If you're gaining 10%, if you're getting 5% off a trade, but you make 20 trades, you've doubled the value of your roster. And you didn't do it any big move at a time. And who cares if you bust a couple of trades? If you're making volume on trades and if you're trying to gain a little bit on each trade, who cares if a couple of them bust? It doesn't matter. And that was my rant. You guys got anything else before we move on? All right. And our next one comes from Snugglicious. It's, what are your thoughts on adjusting to league inflation? My league mates don't seem to have the same perspective in regards to dynasty value versus redraft value. For example, I'm offering Evans for an RB1 and a second rounder. He needs an RB1 and has significant wide receiver depth. But the team manager sees the RB1 value as Evans plus a first. While most in this sub would balk at giving up Evans for so little, he's in a tough position. I've often thought that I'll just have to wait it out until the running back bubble bursts, and I'm left with wide receiver 1s in my 2 wide receiver spots and 2 flex spots. And that's exactly what you need to do. And trading Evans for an RB1 and a second rounder is, I don't care how good your wide receiver depth is, that's not a move I would look at making. I don't care if it's Le'Veon Bell. I wouldn't give Evans in a second rounder for Le'Veon Bell. That's I would just hold on to your wide receivers and pick up just flyers at the position and piece running back together with Cameron Artis-Payne and just whoever, doesn't matter. Roy Halou, and just beat him to death with your wide receivers.
Yeah, I would count myself fortunate if that were the case. In most of the leagues that I'm in, especially with you guys, wide receiver is God, and to me, rightfully so. That's the way it should be. So, yeah, let them have all the running backs they want, man. Let them roll the 4 sets and those guys out there. Who gives a shit? Like Drew said, piece it together. Go get Danny Woodhead for free. Just find a guy who's going to get some touches and let your wide receivers rule ass. I had a couple of championship teams last year where it was Fred Jackson and Shane Vereen and Ronnie Hillman and just throwing crap out there at running back every week, but winning. Because you got DT and you got Jordy and Antonio Brown and Evans, guys like that. That wide receiver is a position that's going to hold longer, more consistently. You're going to win, and you can pick up running backs that can still be productive for cheap. And every now and then you pick a Jeremy Hill, who was cheap as all hell this time last year. You could get him for not a whole lot, really. And now he's widely considered a top 5 dynasty running back. So they're out there. You just got to be active in finding them, and don't overpay. Don't trade your stud 22-year-old wide receiver for a running back just to fill a need, especially in the summertime. If you just really have to fill that need, wait until it's playoff push time. And even then, I'm not going to advocate trading Mike Evans, but yeah, especially this time of year, I don't even give a shit what I could have 0 running backs for all I care.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every podcast right now is saying it. Like, it's July. Who cares about what your starting lineup looks like in July? Worry about it at the end of August, right before the season starts. If you think you're going to be a competitive team and you need to fill that running back spot, worry about it then. Who cares now? It doesn't matter. You've got time to make 20 more trades before then, and I'm sure you can get some running back throw-ins.
Yeah, you guys said it right on the head. I have a league that's something similar to that. I have Demaryius Thomas, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins as my starting 3 wide receivers, and I don't really have much for crap at running back. I actually was able to get C.J. Anderson last year, but that was just someone that kind of came up the ranks. So I would just, like you guys said, keep the wide receiver. Don't undersell for any reason. It's silly because you're going to continue to have value in these guys long after this person that they want you to give a running back or a first rounder and your top wide receiver for, or a top wide receiver for. I'd hold it. You guys already covered the rest. I think we killed that one.
Yep, and our next question comes from Mevi003. I don't know if I'm saying that right, no, excuse me. Yeah, that's right. How would a contract league with a max contract of 5 years, no extensions, alter your valuation of rookies? Since a lot of the inherent value of wide receiver over running back is the shelf life, would a restriction like this change things? And, I mean, Tyler and I are not the two to be asking about contract leagues. I don't know how many. I think Scott and I did one contract league last year, and it already folded because Kamish was not on top of his game. So for me, it might affect it a little bit. I might favor guys I see having early production over, more project players, more than valuing position over position. But I would value those guys that are going to produce early and trade them while their contract's cheap, because that contract is going to have value. That cheap contract, sell them to a contender who doesn't have, isn't going to have anything for cap space, and pick up a bunch of first-round picks and, some other sexy pieces. But, I mean, I wish I had more insight to give you about contract leaks, but it's not something I really play around with too much.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't play. I was in the one contract league, and there was a bunch of different things that were going on with the contracts. They went up every single year anyways if you played them, and all kinds of other stuff. So I would think that running back would be a little bit closer to wide receiver, but I still wouldn't think it'd be ridiculous because you're still going to have to pay for these wide receivers eventually, and the running backs are still going to die off really fast. So I guess the thing would be that if you get the running back first, why give them up, or you're going to have to trade for a cheap running back that people didn't see coming or something like that. Pretty much feel the same way I felt about the last question. It's still stay with wide receiver first, and then, I mean, running backs behind that.
Yeah, and I'm sure Tyler has nothing to offer us on contract leagues, so we'll move on to our next question. Comes from at Johnny Bravo, or just Johnny Bravo. He's a Reddit guy. And great cartoon, by the way. Give get some misogyny in your Saturday morning cartoons. It's fantastic. As a Jags fan, I'm unsure how I feel about our backfield. Do you think Yeldon takes it over, or can Robinson fight him off? Also, could this Allen Robinson hype have real results? And I think we'll start with Yeldon, and I think Tyler and I have made our opinions on Yeldon fairly well known. So, Scott, we're going to let you tell us what you think about Yeldon.
Yeldon is the best running back there. That's just all it comes down to. I think he'll easily beat out Denard Robinson, and yeah, that's really all I have to say about that.
But what about Toby Gerhart?
Ooh, you made a good point. I say Yeldon.
Yeah, well, I guess that's fair. I guess they are transitioning him to be some kind of H-back, fullback hybrid, which is hilarious to me considering how much value he had last offseason, and one of us invested in him, and it wasn't me.
I had some Gerhardt in my life. That didn't go well. But luckily, I claimed him off the last waiver run in several spots, and I was pretty excited. And I didn't even trade him. People were like, what do you want for Gerhardt? I'm like, 9 million first-rounders because he's going to run for 2,000 yards. Nah. Yeldon, for me, I think there's a really, really good chance we're looking at 3 top 5 dynasty running backs out of this class this time next year with Gurley, Gordon, and TJ Yeldon. I really do. Yeah, the Jags are a mess. Their O-line's a mess. Blake Bortles is quote-unquote terrible. Things don't stay the same forever. I think things are going in the right direction in Jacksonville, and I think TJ Yeldon's going to be a boss. He's already a top 10 dynasty running back for me, and a lot of that is his talent. I had him, I think, as my RB4 or something going into the draft, and then he moved up to 3 for me after the draft situation's pretty nice. Not a lot of competition. I do like Denard Robinson. I think Shoelace is a nice player, but if you got some utility out of him last year, you did really well because that's probably gone out the window for the most part, except for some spot duty work. But yeah, Yeldon's going to lead that team in touches, and I'll be really, really, really surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty much would just repeat what Tyler said, so I'm not going to bother. But Yeldon to me is closer to Gordon than Gordon is to Gurley, so it can be taken that I'm fairly high on Yeldon, and they could all 3 absolutely be top 5 dynasty tight ends. Tight ends. That's not even close. Top 5 dynasty running backs next year. I mean, what's their competition besides Le'Veon Bell and Eddie Lacy? Jeremy Hill, who could easily be in a committee this year and not see the kind of work he did next year, and everybody else is old. And then there's Carlos Hyde, who knows what's going to happen there. So they could all make it into the top 5, and it wouldn't shock me all that much. And as for Allen Robinson, I don't know why we keep using this hype word, like, it's just manufactured, because he's already awesome. It's not just hype. He's already a badass. We just have to wait for the production to show up afterwards. So this is my completely unbiased answer. I also, Tyler says that Blake Bortles is quote-unquote bad. He looked really, really good when he got on the field at first last year. And playing behind that shit O-line gave him the David Carr syndrome, started getting scared every time he dropped back, which will affect a quarterback's performance. I think, he's got a whole offseason to kind of refine that and work on his mechanics, and I think he could easily come back and put up, even if he puts up high-end quarterback 2 numbers, that's going to be more than enough to fuel some insane wide receiver production for Allen Robinson.
Yep. A-Rob is legit. It's going to happen. There's no derailing that train. It's going to be what it is. The dude is a freak. He's got all the measurables. He's got the size, and he has these crazy ball skills. I mean, I just don't see any way that it doesn't happen. And with Bortles, I expect progression, and I expect him to look much, much, much better this year, and he is, for a young starting quarterback, he is cheap right now, like super, super cheap. He is sitting on the bottom end of the QB class from last year, and he's being drafted where I've seen outside of the top 20 quarterbacks. So I don't see any reason not to take a run at Blake Bortles because the cost of acquisition is so minimal. Why not? Because, the upside is legit. There's a reason he went top 5 in the NFL draft last year, even though it was kind of a shocker when it happened. It wasn't an accident. I always say that. It wasn't an accident. These NFL teams and these scouts, for the most part, they know what they're doing. So let's give it another year or two and see what he turns into. But all aboard the A-Rob train. I'll be your conductor.
Choo-choo.
Yep. I'm riding. I'm sipping on the Kool-Aid. A-Rob hype is real.
Yeah, and people want to say, yeah, well, he's a top 5 pick, but it was the Jags. These are not the Jags we're used to seeing. These are not the same front office Jags that picked Blaine Gabbert. This is a solid front office they got. This is a solid coaching staff they have, and they've had the team going in the right direction for the last 2 drafts now. I think the arrow is definitely pointing up for them, and I mean that includes Bortles. So I'm excited. And let's move on to our next question. This comes from Josh Nipples. It's another fantastic name. We've been getting a lot of those lately. We are in an 8-team league that lost an owner, but we are adding 3 more to expand the league. We're adding the orphan team players to our expansion dispersal draft. Generally, what do you think is a healthy ratio for roster protection for an expansion draft? Clearly, expansion teams shouldn't be amazing in their first year, but we also want to make sure they can get a solid foundation to build from. Expansion is such a hard concept. It's such a hard thing to do. I mean, we're all 3 in a league where we talked about doing an expansion, and some guys built for youth. So unless you've got 100% support behind doing an expansion and guys having to give up, their depth, some guys build around depth. Unless you have 100% support behind it, I would not be in favor of doing it without a complete redraft. As in terms of a healthy ratio, I wouldn't even know what to say. I'd say maybe protect 5 players off the bat, and then every time that team has a player picked from them, you get to protect another player. That's these are just ideas I'm coming up with off the top of my head because we couldn't even come up with a good solution to do it in ours. We kept it at 10 teams because we could not figure out a good way to do an expansion draft where everybody would be happy.
I have too many linebackers. You can't have 15 linebackers and then have to only keep 2. You just can't.
Linebacker hoarding, it's a real thing.
So
I'm
many.
such a hoarder. And safeties, oh my God. I love them all. I just love them all. I can't bring myself to drop any. But in this scenario where you're going from an 8-team league to a 10-team league, depending on the roster size, the talent pool of free agents is inherently just going to be bigger, right? So I wouldn't even know how to approach it, but I would think there would be some way of doing like a free agent draft amongst the expansion teams before the established teams can get their hands in that pool, because there are bound to be, I don't know, 30, 40 guys in the free agent pool that are rostered in almost every dynasty league in that scenario. But I don't know, man, the expansion thing, we get asked it a lot, and I just end up just kind of, well, I don't know, because it is a slippery, slippery slope.
Yeah, maybe the best way to do it is cut down the size of your rosters. Big guys cut people from their rosters and give these expansion teams, early picks for a year or 2. Regardless of how they place, guarantee that they get the top 2 picks in the draft. So that way they, they're not just immediately stuck with garbage. But I don't have a good answer. I wish I could help. But it's just one of those. It's a tough situation to be in. And unless you guys have something else, I'm gonna move on to the next question. So, our next question comes from Shaq026. How's next year's draft going to be? Will there be a lot of high-level quarterbacks, wide receivers, or running backs? What can I expect to have access to in next year's draft? First off, there's going to be the closest comparison for quarterback class is going to be the Andrew Luck, Robert Griffin class in terms of available quarterbacks that you might want to draft. Maybe 2013 might be a better, or not 2013. Yeah, 2013, the Blake Bortles class. I don't know years anymore. I've lost my mind, but there's going to be 3 or 4 quarterbacks probably go in the first round next year, which is more than we're used to seeing. As in terms of wide receivers and running backs, it's probably going to be somewhere between the 2015 class and I want to say the 2012 class or 2013 class. I'm serious. I can't remember years anymore. The Alshon Jeffrey class, the Michael Floyd class. It's going to be somewhere between 2013. Yep. And it's gonna be somewhere in between there because 2014's class is 2014 class is just you can't compare anything to it, and 2015 class is going to be way deeper than most drafts as well. So I'm not going to expect that to be the norm in terms of wide receivers or running backs. I don't really have a good grasp on how deep either position is going to be yet, just because we've just started digging into the tape on these guys. And there's still a lot of time for these guys to break out. We didn't have any idea who Kevin White was this time last year, especially as a top 10 NFL draft pick. So there's going to be guys like that show up that we just can't expect. So
I'm already in love with next year's class. I think the top end is going to be similar with Coop and Gurley. But I think the whole first round is going to be better than this year's class. You got the quarterbacks, and it's really muggy out there at quarterback. Christian Hackenberg is kind of the big name, and the community is completely split on him. Some guys love him, and some guys hate him. You got Jared Goff, Trevon Boykin, who plays up the road from me and at TCU, great athlete. Cardale Jones, who God knows what's going to happen there. I still think J.T. Barrett's a better player, but I'm no professional. Running back, you got Zeke, obviously, up at the top, and then, Derrick Henry, Corey Clement, Thomas Tyner, who's been a Debbie darling for several years. We'll see what happens out there. He's going to be battling Royce for snaps, and then wide receiver, Boyd, Treadwell, Williams, Corey Davis, Derunya, Duke Wilson. And there are a lot of big wide receivers next year, too, which I really like. There are a lot of those guys that are in the 6'2", 6'3", 220 range, which is really cool. 16 is a class that I'm looking forward to as being a very, very legit rookie class. And just on the surface, I think it is quite a bit better than this year's class.
And I have no idea. I've watched like 3 guys in total, and go team.
All right. That was our contribution from Scott, and our next question comes from @ComeInFatty, who he's been a fun little follow recently. I have a question for you guys for the next podcast. Does John Brown overtake Floyd this year, or is it all hype? I'm not gonna say it's all hype because I like John Brown, but there ain't no way in hell he's taking over Michael Floyd's spot. Michael Floyd is just a better wide receiver. He's better. And anybody who says different is wrong. They're wrong. Michael Floyd is awesome, and he was just used wrong last year. Now, granted, part of that's completely biased because I bought into the hype so hard last year. But I like John Brown, but he's not going to be a better wide receiver than Michael Floyd is. Plain and simple.
Yeah, to me, it's they're just two different players. I know we talked about the Philip Dorsett, Dante Moncrief dynamic a few weeks ago, and it's kind of similar to me, where I don't really see one affecting the other positively or negatively. I like John Brown. I drafted John Brown in a lot of spots last year. Love having him on my roster. He's older for a second-year player. I bet he's not 2 years younger than Mike Floyd is. if that. So just two totally different deals. The hype, it's hard to say what the hype is. Even as hyped as John Brown's ever going to get, you're not going to see him go inside the top 25 wide receivers in any startup draft. You're probably not going to see him go inside the top 30 wide receivers in any startup draft. So I just don't think they affect each other one way or the other. And I do think John Brown has the capability to have a pretty nice season next year. And I think Floyd bounces back too. If we can just get Mike Floyd used as a wide receiver rather than just a glorified 9-route runner, we can see those numbers really take off. And Fitz is old as hell, man. I love Larry Fitzgerald, but it's time to pass the torch, old man.
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I think it depends, I guess, on what he meant by overtake. Does John Brown overtake Floyd in fantasy points scored this year? Possibly. I wouldn't count that out of the realm of possibilities. But there's no way he takes over Michael Floyd's position on the team. Like, you're not going to see Brown lining up instead of Floyd lining up and doing 9 routes, if that's still what they end up using him for. So I don't really think, I agree with Tyler, I don't really think they affect each other adversely. If anything, they just help each other out. When one's doing better, he's drawing coverage, the other one gets to be more open. So I don't think this is an either or. I think they're both going to have better years than they had last year.
Honestly, I wish they'd switch with each other. You know, utilize that speed that John Brown has and send him on a bunch of 9 routes and let Floyd be used more in a possession role, because that's where he's going to succeed. And I mean, he wasn't even bad as a 9-route runner, but it kills his fantasy value. He was still fairly successful doing that. But when you lose Carson Palmer and you're stuck with, just garbage at quarterback after, who was their third string last year that ended up starting a couple of games?
Ryan Lindley?
Lindley, and then
Logan Thomas took a couple snaps and they were like, ooh, that didn't work.
Yeah, that was against Denver.
Hey, he threw a touchdown.
I don't think Logan Thomas is happening, dude. I don't think that's ever happening.
You shut up.
I don't know if you can call that throwing a touchdown. That was like...
I will call it whatever I want.
He barely got it to him, and I don't even know how he got through everybody after that. That's just...
It was so bad. I think his only completed pass was that touchdown, and then every other pass was just not. Every other pass hit the dirt. So I'm still believing, though. Don't give up. I should probably give up.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from @Chris Benaud. In leagues where there's a lot of IDP talent on the wire, do you ever stream? If so, how do you go about doing it? Hell yes, I stream. Stream all the defensive backs. Unless you're starting 4 a week, then there's going to be guys on the wire. So I'm not investing heavily in the DB position at all. Linebacker, you're going to be able to stream that as well. There's going to be a ton of extremely usable linebacker talent in leagues where there's talent on the wire. Defensive line is probably the only one where you're not going to be able to really stream week to week, even if the wire has good IDP talent on it.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily really stream IDP. I just keep my ear to the ground. I'm looking at the wire. I'm trying to pick up guys that I think have a chance to break out. And if there's a lot of IDP talent on the wire, I'm definitely not going to invest any real capital in it. And I never really invest a lot of real capital in IDP anyway. I typically wait, and sometimes I wait way the hell too long. But that's typically how I'll do it. And then in rookie drafts, the first thing I'm going to do, okay, we're in a rookie draft. We're in the middle of the 3rd round, and I'm looking at a certain linebacker. I'm immediately going to go to top available free agents at that position. And if I count more than 3 or 4, I'm passing and I'm going offense. Like say I count more than 3 or 4 linebackers that I say, okay, this guy's probably going to be very comparable to the guy whom I would draft. Let's just go get offense. So, yeah, for me, it's not necessarily about streaming. It's just about being aware who's out there. And also pay attention. If you are streaming, pay attention. Who is What are the good stat crews? Who's giving out a ton of solos? Like Buffalo gives out a ton of solos. Who gives out a ton of assists? Seattle gives out a ton of assists. So if you got a guy that you're looking at and he's going to play in Seattle this week, lean somewhere else. Go somewhere else for a guy that might score better depending on the scoring crew. And then there are teams that are good matchups. Like I think I spoke before, Pittsburgh has been historically a really good matchup for linebackers. Linebackers are typically going to score more points against Pittsburgh than they do against Team X. So that's another thing to pay attention to. It just a lot of IDP is just research. Just if you're looking for those little edges, that's where you get them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say everything Tyler was going to say. I swear I had it all written down here. He took it.
Poor Scott.
You got sniped.
Scott never gets to have his own original thoughts unless he gets to go first. Poor Scott. All right, let's go to our next. Our next question comes from at Adon Davenport, who is he's a 2QB writer over at FakePason.com. He and I have worked together on some stuff before. He's really knowledgeable in that area, and he wants to know: do you feel Gronk will be Gronk without Brady, Graham without Breeze, Julius without Peyton? And let's start off real quick, and let's not include Julius Thomas in the same conversation as Gronk and Graham because he's not.
He's the original butthole of the Dynasty Playbook. I think I went into the archives and discovered he was the first guy that we told to.
Third person.
Yeah, don't be a butthole, JT.
Yeah, he's not going to be putting up double-digit touchdowns in any season with Blake Bortles, even if Blake Bortles gets better, because Blake Bortles is not going to throw 55 touchdowns in any season ever. It's not going to happen. So, no, I don't even have Julius Thomas in my tight end 1 rankings anymore. So, nope. As for Gronk, I think Gronk will be Gronk even if he was playing with Ryan Lindley. He's that good. Whereas Graham is going to be a little more dependent on better QB play, but I think, he still gets to go play with Russell Wilson, who is, he's not Drew Brees, but he's one of the better up-and-coming quarterbacks. So if he still puts up the tight end number 2 numbers, I'm not going to be surprised at all because he's got that upside. He's got that upside regardless of who he plays with.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Gronk is ridiculous. Gronk will be Gronk regardless of who he plays with. I would definitely say that. He's shown it time and again. Dude's just an absolute beast. He's not going to be stopped. He won't let anyone stop him. Graham, I would agree, is more dependent, but still going to be better than the average tight end. He's basically a wide receiver at this point anyways. I think he will still have a good season, but I don't think he'll be quite the same as he was when he was with Drew Brees.
I think Graham's going to be just fine in Seattle. It's not like they have this wealth of wide receiver talent. They don't. It's bad.
Doug Baldwin
and the Super Bowl hero and Lockett, Ricardo Lockett, who looks like he's all man, but he's not very good. Jermaine Kearse, and you got Tyler Lockett, who's a midget. Graham's going to get
Jermaine Kearse. Whoo, you're getting me all hot, man.
Man, and Graham's going to get fed. He's going to get his. Yeah, so I'm not, I mean, can we expect some regression? Sure. But it's not like Graham was logging a ton of snaps in New Orleans anyway. He's been banged up. He wasn't getting used in line a lot. Graham's still easily the tight end 2 for me. Easily. There is a canyon in between Jimmy Graham and Travis Kelce for me. And it's massive. So, and then JT, I was never there. If I was ever on it, I'm over it. I'm past it. I'm done. Moving on. JT has broke-ass ankles. He caught a lot of touchdowns, man. I wrote an article where I comped his 2013 and 14 numbers to Heath Miller. And if you take the touchdowns out of the equation, Julius Thomas was Heath Miller. So let's keep that in mind. Nobody's out there breaking their necks trying to get Heath Miller, nor should you with Julius Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas has never even broken 800 yards receiving in a season. something like that. That's
Yeah.
piss poor. You take that, exactly. You take the touchdowns out of that, and he's doo doo poo poo. So I think that's really all we got to say about that. And let's move on to our last question. It comes from @BreezeIDP, our buddy Eric, who he just joined us for our IDP Playbook last week. Which, if you guys are IDP fans, you haven't checked it out, you guys need to do that ASAP. That show is a blast, and it's got a ton of good information in it. And he wants to know who will be next year's Cooks/A-Rob, our man crushes, so we can get them now before the price skyrockets. And there's a lot of the guys that are top picks. Tyler Boyd is my guy, but he's going to be a lot of people's guy. I like Marquez North. He's pretty far down people's radars right now, but I think it's partially due to just having a poor 2014 season. This guy was looking pretty damn studly after 2013, and I'm pretty stoked for him as a prospect. That's gonna be my guy.
I am falling in love with, and I hope I pronounce his name right, Jordan Villeman, the wideout from Oregon State. Dude's like 6'4", 230. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's that team big wide receiver kind of guy that I love. So I'm very interested to see what he does next year. And Oregon State's been historically, granted they lost their coach, but it's been historically very productive for wide receivers going all the way back to the Ocho Cinco days, through Brandon Cooks and Marcus Wheaton. These guys have put up some big numbers. So Villeman's a guy that I definitely have on my radar. I usually single out the first giant wide receiver I can find, and that's going to be the guy I like. Darunya Wilson, is that his name? The kid from Mississippi State?
Yep.
When I'm watching Josh Robinson tape, I'm like, who is this guy? I mean, he's like rail post skinny, but he's got to be 6'5", 6'6". The dude's huge. So that's another guy. That's another guy that I really like. Corey Davis at Western Michigan, really like him. I'm getting all giddy about this class, and I'm probably putting the cart way before the horses. I am one to do, but there are several of them. Laquan Treadwell's obviously the man crush of all man crushes for me, but he's going to be everybody's man crush.
I don't watch college football.
Oh, I gotta watch. That's my first love. That's what got me into Dynasty in the first place. It was college football. It was the ability to own these guys that I've watched for all these years and stock up on Texas Longhorns.
Past slavery. Quit trying to own people.
I want them on my team. I want these Longhorns who have been so shitty for so many. I'm trying to square peg round hole some of these Longhorns this year, even though Jordan Hicks is going to be legit. But yeah.
Yeah, mine's not exactly the same reason why I got into Dynasty. Mine was closer to, I'd watch these guys in college and be super excited about them, and then I'd draft them as rookies and redraft and waste my pick. And I'm like, I gotta find a way to make this worth my time. And then I'm like, Dynasty, that sounds like a good idea. Rookies, all the rookies, and I'm sure Scott like Madden. That's probably why he plays Dynasty, huh, Scott?
You caught me. I already do it on the freaking systems all the time, all the console systems, and decided I wanted to do it against other people. I don't like playing online on Madden because my internet sucked at the time.
You know what was cool before Ed O'Bannon and Sam Keller killed the NCAA football game that I used to play every year religiously going back to like the 90s was you could do your NCAA dynasty where you recruit and everything and you build your teams, and then you can export those players to a file, and then on the Madden you can actually draft the college players from the NCAA game, and that was like crack, man. That was so cool.
I was always disappointed though, because they would be like 99s overall in NCAA, and they'd come over and they'd be like 78.
But you just got to pump them up. I remember drafting Steven Jackson as a rookie onto my Madden team. Woo! Had old Paul Posluszny. It was a gas, man. That was so cool.
Tell us, Grandpa, how were telegraphs? How did you used to communicate with those?
Carrier pigeon.
Carrier pigeon.
I'll tell you though, they have totally ruined franchise mode for Madden. I probably haven't bought a Madden game. I bought like 12 or 13, and it was due to in that, and I haven't touched a Madden game since. I'll play the old ones over trying to screw with their just janky ass franchise mode now. It sucks now.
How would you even know?
Because nobody's came out and said it's better, so I'm not going to buy a new one until they say it's better.
See, when they killed NCAA, I just boycotted EA Sports. I'm done with them. I will not buy their products any longer.
But it's in the game.
Bastards. They ruined it.
If it's in the game, it's in the game. That's all I'm trying to say.
We used to have so much fun with that crap. So much fun. And now it's dead. Thank you, Ed O'Bannon, who will never listen to our rinky-dink, small-time podcast. But if somehow you hear this, eat a dick.
Hashtag don't be a butthole.
I feel like that Madden rant can fill in as my rant of the week for this week. But that it's a good week. We had a lot of good content this week. It's good to have Scott back. We need to get you on Twitter so people can publicly berate you. It's always fun. And I think that's about all we got for this week. You guys have any last parting shots for us?
Don't be a butthole.
There you go. Don't be a butthole. Guys, this has been the Dynasty Playbook, your source for all sorts of shenanigans and occasionally some Dynasty football content. I've been your host, Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF Marine, on Twitter at DrewDotsonNFL. With me have been my excellent co-hosts, Tyler and Scott. You can find Tyler on Reddit at Barles, on Twitter at HBombIDP. You can find Scott on Reddit at Stewie35, and on Twitter, to be determined. I almost called you Stewie.
That would have been interesting. I was like, hey, that's still me.
Yeah.
I know who he's talking to.
Guys, thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you again next week.